much for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. My name is Emma, and I've got Clay with me today, and we're going to be talking about customer experience really across the life cycle of insurance, kind of beyond just the carrier perspective. But before I get to all the questions that I've got for you, Clay, can you give everybody a real quick introduction?
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Emma. I appreciate the opportunity to come spend some time talking through this customer experience and the life cycle of the entire process. And I think that that's something that is hugely important. So currently I'm the Chief Claims Officer over at Brush Claims, an independent adjusting firm, TPA, based out of Austin, Texas. Prior to joining Brush, I spent approximately 17 years between being a general contractor and working at large carriers throughout the country, from top 5 companies down to startups, most recently prior to joining Brush. And really the customer experience, the customer relationship is really what this is, right? It's the relationship, and building that and growing that and understanding what that looks like has been at the forefront of my decision making and my goals moving forward of how this works and how we do things the right way moving forward. So looking forward to the opportunity to talk through that a little bit.
Well, great. Thank you for joining me. So to get us started, obviously anybody that's come to join me for one of these conversations in the past, or really is not living under a rock, knows that there's this big push for digital experiences and digital first within our industry. But I want to get the conversation started by just kind of picking your brain about where that balance between digital experiences and human capital really sits, and kind of what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think the change and the understanding between the digital first versus the human connection is something that has really been at the forefront of not only insurance, but other industries for quite a few years. And I think, speaking specifically to claims, understanding how people can work together, people and technology and other people all kind of meld a relationship throughout a claims process. We as an industry need to understand how our customers want to be serviced in order to service them in a way that they have the satisfaction moving forward, and they understand the rationale and the reasoning behind why we're making the decisions that we're making. On one hand, we're going to have customers that are completely willing to have a 100% digital process. They're willing to file their claim on an EF&OL with a chatbot, have aerial imagery used, and have an online payment happen. And on the other hand, there's people that want to talk to somebody, want the adjuster to come out, and want to be handheld and walk through that entire process. And there's nothing wrong with either of those. It's our responsibility to figure out who needs what and how they want to be serviced.
So then when we kind of take a look at this, like unlocking these insights of how the customer wants to interact with us, whether it's on the carrier side, the IA side, or anybody else that's servicing a customer within the insurance industry, do we have access to that information, or where do you think we should be seeking kind of that engagement and asking those questions of our customers?
I think we have access because we have access to our customer from initial inception all the way through the claims process. So we understand how people want to communicate when they are reaching out to an agent or reaching out to a direct consumer carrier. How are they reaching out? Let's understand that. Let's keep and continue understanding that process throughout the entire life cycle of that customer within the company that they are with. If we have a customer that binds strictly online, files a claim online, reports their initial contact online, maybe there's things that we can pull from that conversation history of how they would like to be serviced moving forward. So it's us using our resources around us and that situational awareness to understand how people want to be communicated with and the best, most efficient ways to drive that communication and to deliver on their results. Because at the end of the day, one person might have an awesome experience because we communicated the right way with them versus someone else who doesn't like text messaging, that we tried to push that on. And I use we as the industry here of understanding what those customers like. So we have to understand the entire history of somebody in order to deliver on that on the back end.
So you just brought up this idea of kind of understanding the history of the relationship, but do you have other suggestions of how companies can kind of is it as simple as just like, should we be asking every customer when they're buying a policy, some of these things, but what tips or suggestions do you have, whether it's for carriers or other folks within the industry, to make sure that we're getting that information right and then servicing our customers the way that they're looking for?
So yes, I do think a big piece of this is asking the question and making sure that we take the information that we get when we ask the question and actually doing that. Don't ask the question, get the answer, and do something different. Like, let's follow through on that promise. We ask somebody a question, they give us an answer. That's a promise for us to, at that point, step in, reach out to them in the way that is most comfortable for them, that they feel most efficient and they can get the most information from. That's not saying that if we have someone who wants to really walk through this process with physical people on site and phone calls and everything else, that some text messages and some things throughout the process don't work, but those are ancillary to really what that customer wants. And looking at the entire life cycle is really the easiest way to do it, because we have more data points throughout the entire life cycle to understand what that person really wants to push for.
Well, and I think it's also would be interesting too. Sometimes we'll ask things like, what's your preferred communication, like email, text, phone call, but we don't delineate like, okay, and if you were in a claims scenario versus just like getting information, like I'm cool with paperless delivery of, my bills and paying my premiums that through electronic channels. And even sometimes, depending on the severity of a claim, I'm good with going digital channels there. But in more severe cases, I might, if I were asked and kind of led through the process differently, I might have different opinions on what that would look like. So I think we have some potential ability to be more specific in the way that we're asking some of those questions to help make sure that we're getting it right every time.
No, absolutely. I think we have to be more intentional with how we reach out and how we ask those questions. If we don't have that intentionality in what we're asking and then following up on it, we're not going to get the desired result. And at the end of the day, the customer is number one. So we are servicing that customer. And that doesn't matter what side of the business you're on, from an underwriter to an agent to claims to customer service, like that is the goal. And if we aren't intentional with asking questions and actually intentional with applying that answer, the industry fails.
And I think just like actually listening and following through is like good life advice for everybody in the stage of where we are in the world.
100%. 100%.
Well, thank you for joining me for the conversation, Clay. For anybody who's watching, if you're not already, make sure you make your way over to Clay's LinkedIn, give him a follow there. Certainly reach out to either one of us if you've got any questions. But otherwise, thank you again for joining me and have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Leading Change. If you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe and come back weekly for more expert interviews on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.